Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of an ancient, unseen realm, one that exists not in the world around you, but within. It is a labyrinth, vast and intricate, woven from the threads of your own thoughts, emotions, and the hidden truths you've yet to uncover. Every twist and turn of this inner maze holds a whisper of who you are, a fragment of why you feel, think, and act as you do. But as you take your first step into this mysterious domain, a question lingers like a faint echo in the air. How much do you truly know about the landscape of your own mind? This labyrinth is not made of stone or earth, but of something far more elusive, layers of consciousness that shift and shimmer like mist over a quiet lake. Some paths are well-trodden, worn smooth by habits and beliefs you've carried for years, while others remain shrouded, untouched, waiting for a spark of curiosity to illuminate them. There are corners where joy dances with memory, and others where doubt creeps silently, casting long shadows over your sense of certainty. And then there are the hidden chambers, places even you, the keeper of this maze, may not dare to explore, where fears, desires, and forgotten moments lie dormant, shaping your choices in ways you cannot see. Consider the strangeness of it all. This mind, this labyrinth, is both your closest companion and your greatest enigma. You live within its walls every moment of your life. Yet how often do you pause to question its architecture? Why do certain thoughts loop endlessly, like a melody you can't shake, while others vanish before you can grasp them? Why do emotions surge like sudden storms, only to dissipate into calm without explanation? The deeper you wander, the more you realize that this inner world is not just a passive space. It plays tricks, weaving illusions so subtle that you mistake them for reality itself. A fleeting worry can grow into a towering obstacle. A single word can tilt the way you see the world. Are you the master of this maze, or merely a traveler, guided by forces you've yet to understand? Take a moment to reflect on this. Let your thoughts drift to a memory, any memory, of a time when your mind seemed to steer you in a direction you didn't expect. Perhaps a decision felt certain, only to unravel later as something less your own than you believed. Or maybe a feeling, sharp and undeniable, arose from nowhere, coloring your day without a clear source. What lies beneath these moments? What unseen currents move through the labyrinth, nudging you along paths you didn't choose to walk? As you stand at this threshold, gazing into the winding depths of your own psychology, there is a quiet thrill in the unknown. The human mind is a universe unto itself, infinite in its complexity, yet intimately personal. Every thought, every emotion is a clue to a larger puzzle, a puzzle that philosophers, poets, and scientists have sought to solve for centuries. From the ancient Greeks who pondered the nature of the soul, to modern thinkers mapping the neural pathways of decision, the quest to understand the mind has always been a journey into mystery. And yet, for all our knowledge, the labyrinth remains. It hums with questions that have no easy answers. Are we truly the authors of our thoughts, or are they shaped by forces beyond our grasp? Can we ever map every corner of this inner realm, or will some paths always elude us? Let this curiosity settle over you like a soft veil. There is no need to rush through these questions, no urgency to find the center of the maze tonight. Instead, let yourself linger here, at the entrance, feeling the weight of wonder. The mind is not just a tool or a machine. It is a living, breathing mystery, a place of endless discovery. And as you take your first tentative steps into its depths, you sense that this journey will reveal not only the tricks it plays, but also the quiet truths it holds. For now, simply breathe, and let the labyrinth whisper its secrets in its own time. Imagine for a moment that you are the master of your own destiny, the captain of a ship cutting through the vast ocean of life with a steady hand on the wheel. Every choice you make, every turn you take, feels like a deliberate act of will, a testament to your independence. But what if, beneath the surface of that calm sea, invisible currents were guiding your course? What if the very sense of control you cling to is but a mirage, a trick played by the quiet machinery of your mind. Let us wander into the story of a man named Elias, who lived in a small, bustling town where the rhythm of life seemed as predictable as the rising sun. Elias prided himself on his decisiveness. Each morning, he would stand before his wardrobe, selecting his attire with care, believing each choice was born of his own free will. He would walk to the market, haggling over the price of bread with a sharp tongue, convinced that his words were his own. Even the path he took through the winding streets, avoiding the crowded corners, felt like a strategy crafted by his own cleverness. To Elias, life was a series of decisions, each one a brick in the sturdy wall of his autonomy. But one evening, as the amber light of dusk settled over the town, Elias sat by his window, a cup of tea cooling in his hands, and began to notice something peculiar. He traced his day backward, step by step, and saw patterns he hadn't seen before. The blue shirt he wore, hadn't he chosen it because it was the first one his eyes fell upon, a habit formed from hurried mornings long ago? The market stall he frequented, wasn't it simply the one closest to his childhood home, a route etched into his feet by years of repetition? Even his sharp haggling, which he thought was a mark of his wit, echoed the tone and phrases of his father, words borrowed from a voice he hadn't heard in decades. As these thoughts unfolded, a quiet unease settled into Elias's chest. He began to see the invisible strings, habits, routines, unspoken rules that tugged at his every move. The more he looked, the more he realized how little of his day was truly chosen. His preferences, his paths, even his stubborn refusal to take the quieter streets were not the fruits of conscious thought, but the whispers of conditioning, biases buried so deep they masqueraded as freedom. What then was his will? Was he the captain of his ship, or merely a passenger lulled into believing he held the wheel? Take a moment to reflect on this. Are there strings in your own life, so subtle you've never noticed them? Perhaps a choice you make each day, a belief you hold, a path you follow without question, shaped not by your own hand, but by forces long forgotten. This illusion of control is a quiet deceiver, one that wraps us in the comforting blanket of certainty while steering us with hands we cannot see. It is woven into the very fabric of our minds, a product of evolution's design to simplify a chaotic world. Our ancestors, faced with endless dangers and decisions, needed shortcuts to survive, instincts to trust, patterns to follow, habits to lean on. But in our modern lives, these same shortcuts can become chains. A preference for the familiar can blind us to new possibilities. A bias toward what feels safe can keep us from questioning what we've always known. And so, we walk through life believing we are the authors of our story, while the pen often lies in unseen hands. Consider the weight of this illusion as it plays out beyond the personal into the tapestry of history. Entire societies have marched to the beat of invisible drums, convinced of their righteous autonomy. In the early 20th century, crowds rallied behind charismatic leaders, swayed by propaganda that felt like truth, their choices shaped by fear and repetition rather than reason. They believed they were forging their own paths, yet the currents of mass influence, of cultural conditioning, pulled them along. How often does history repeat this dance, where the illusion of control masks the deeper forces at play? And so we must ask ourselves in the stillness of this moment, how much of our own agency is real? Are we truly deciding, or are we merely following a script written by the past, by the world around us, by the quiet hum of our own minds? The question is not meant to unsettle, but to invite a gentle curiosity. For in recognizing these hidden strings, we might begin to loosen their grip. We might step back, even for a fleeting second, and see the currents for what they are, not as masters, but as guides we can choose to follow or resist. Take a moment to reflect on this. Where in your life do you feel most in control, and where might that feeling be an illusion? Let the question linger, like a whisper on the wind, as we sit with Elias by his window, watching the last light of day fade into night, wondering what tomorrow's choices will reveal. Imagine, for just a moment, a single word slipping into your ear like a whisper carried on the wind. It's a word you barely notice, a fleeting sound that brushes past your conscious mind and buries itself somewhere deeper, somewhere unseen. And yet, from that quiet moment onward, the world begins to shift in ways you can't quite grasp. Colors seem brighter, or perhaps darker. Strangers' faces carry a different weight. Your thoughts, once clear, now drift toward ideas you can't trace back to their origin. What if I told you that this subtle shift, this untraceable change, began with that one word, a seed planted without your permission, growing roots in the fertile soil of your subconscious? This is the hidden power of priming, a silent force that shapes how we see, how we think, how we move through the world. It's not a loud command or a deliberate push, but a gentle nudge, a suggestion so soft it evades our defenses. Picture a woman named Clara, walking through a bustling market on a grey autumn morning. The air is thick with the scent of damp, leaves and roasted chestnuts, and the chatter of vendors fills her ears. As she passes a stall, a man calls out to a customer, his voice sharp and clear. Trust. The word hangs in the air for a split second before dissolving into the noise. Clara doesn't stop. She doesn't turn her head. She doesn't even register that she's heard it. But something inside her shifts, imperceptibly, like the first ripple on still water. As she continues through the market, Clara finds herself lingering at a jeweler's stand, studying a tarnished locket with a strange sense of familiarity. The seller, an older woman with kind eyes, smiles warmly and offers a story about the locket's history, a tale of love and loss that feels oddly personal. Clara, who usually guards her wallet with skepticism, feels an unfamiliar pull to believe, to connect. She buys the locket without haggling, without her usual barrage of questions. Later, as she sits on a park bench, turning the cool metal over in her hands, she wonders why she felt so compelled. Why did she trust so easily today? The answer lies in that single word, trust, spoken hours earlier. A seed sown in the 8E quiet garden of her mind, coloring her perceptions without her ever knowing. This is the essence of priming. Our environment, the words we hear, the images we glance at, the smells that drift past us, they all plant ideas, shape expectations, and tint the lens through which we view reality. It's as if the world is a painter, and we are the canvas, unaware of the strokes being applied until the picture is already half formed. Think of the last time you heard a song, melancholic and slow, only to find yourself sinking into a pensive mood for no apparent reason. Or recall a moment when a friend mentioned a far-off place, and suddenly you began noticing references to it everywhere, in books, in conversations, on faded posters. Was it coincidence, or was your mind primed to seek it out, to see what it was already tuned to find? Take a moment to reflect on this. Have there been times in your life when a single word, a passing glance, or a fleeting sound seemed to alter the course of your day? Can you trace the subtle influences that nudged you toward a decision, a feeling, a belief? Sit with that thought for a breath or two, letting it settle like dust in a quiet room. The mystery of priming lies in its invisibility. Psychologists have long studied how these subtle cues can sway our behavior, often without leaving a trace in our conscious awareness. In experiments, people exposed to words associated with speed, words like fast or rush, later walked more quickly down a hallway, unaware of why their pace had changed. Others, shown images of money, became more individualistic, less inclined to help a stranger, all without realizing the connection. It's as if our minds are vast libraries, and priming slips a book onto the shelf, one we don't know we've read until we find ourselves quoting its pages. But let us wander deeper into this thought. If our minds are so easily swayed by whispers, from the outside, how much of what we call our own thoughts truly belongs to us? Are we the authors of our decisions, or are we merely editors, refining ideas that were planted long before we noticed them? Consider Clara again, holding her locket under the pale autumn sun. Did she choose to trust the jeweler, to buy the piece, to feel that fleeting warmth of connection? Or was she merely following a script written by a single word, spoken by a stranger she'll never see again? The boundary between choice and influence blurs, leaving us to wonder where the self begins and the world ends. This quiet manipulation isn't always benign, nor is it always accidental. Advertisers, storytellers, even politicians wield priming as a tool. Knowing that a well-placed image or a carefully chosen phrase can shift entire perspectives. A commercial that pairs a product with laughter primes us to associate it with joy. A speech laden with words of fear primes us to seek safety, often at the cost of reason. And yet, even as we recognize this, we remain vulnerable, for the power of priming lies in its stealth. It operates beneath the surface, in the shadowy corners of the mind, where awareness rarely treads. So let us linger here, in this space of quiet inquiry. Imagine your own mind as a garden, vast and untamed, where seeds of influence are scattered by every breeze. Some grow into flowers of inspiration, others into weeds of doubt or desire. How often do we notice these seeds as they fall? How often do we question the roots of our thoughts, the origins of our inclinations? Take a moment to reflect on this. Picture that garden within you, its soil rich with hidden possibilities. What seeds have been sown today, and what might they grow into tomorrow? As the evening deepens and the world grows still, let this thought be a gentle companion. Priming reminds us that we are not islands, isolated in our minds, but rather shores touched by countless tides. Every word, every image, every fleeting encounter leaves its mark, shaping the landscape of who we are. And though we may never fully map the currents that influence us, there is a quiet power in simply wondering, in pausing to ask what invisible seeds have taken root and what unseen blooms they might yet bear. Imagine a fleeting moment, a mere heartbeat in time, where two souls cross paths for the first time. A glance, a subtle gesture, a hesitant smile. Such fragile threads weave the fabric of how we come to see one another. In that whisper of an instant, before words are spoken or stories shared, a silent verdict is cast. We form impressions that cling to us like morning mist, shaping everything that follows. How often do we pause to consider the weight of those first few seconds? How much of our understanding of another person is sculpted not by who they are, but by the shadow of that initial encounter? Picture a bustling street corner in a city alive with motion. Amidst the hum of hurried steps, two strangers brush past one another. One, a man in a worn coat, carries the faint trace of exhaustion in his eyes. The other, a woman with a quick stride, clutches a book as if it were a lifeline. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second, his gaze heavy, hers fleeting but curious. She notices the creases on his face and, without knowing why, imagines a life of quiet struggle. He catches the way her lips curve upward, just slightly, and senses a warmth he hasn't felt in days. No words are exchanged, no names learned, yet in that ephemeral exchange, a story is born in each of their minds. She walks away thinking of him as someone weathered by hardship, perhaps in need of kindness. He carries with him the image of her as a beacon of gentleness, someone who might understand. And so, if their paths cross again, these first impressions will color every word, every gesture, as if they were truths carved in stone. But what is it about these initial moments that hold such power over us? Is it the mind's desperate need to make sense of the unknown? To fill in the vast blanks of a stranger's life with our own assumptions? We are, after all, creatures of pattern and prediction, forever seeking to anchor ourselves in a world of endless variables. A furrowed brow becomes a symbol of sorrow, a quick smile a sign of openness, and in the blink of an eye, we've constructed a narrative that may bear no resemblance to reality. Yet these snap judgments are not mere whims. They are the quiet architects of our relationships, often deciding whether we draw closer or turn away before a deeper truth has the chance to emerge. Consider, for a moment, the countless times that first impression has steered your own path. Perhaps you met someone whose stern demeanor made you shrink back, only to later discover a heart of unexpected tenderness. Or maybe a charming face led you to trust too quickly, blinding you to flaws that revealed themselves only in time. These initial perceptions act as lenses, tinting the way we see others, often without our awareness. They are the mind's first draft of a story, written in haste, yet so often treated as the final word. Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time a fleeting glance shaped your judgment, and how long did that impression linger before you saw beyond it? There is a certain mystery in how something so brief can carry such lasting consequence. In ancient times, when survival hinged on quick decisions, discerning friend from foe in an instant was a skill that meant life or death. A stranger's posture, the glint in their eye, the tone of their voice, these were signals to be read in a heartbeat. Perhaps this instinct lingers in us still, a relic of a harsher world, whispering to us to judge swiftly, to protect ourselves from the unknown. But in our modern tapestry of complex lives, where danger is rarely so immediate, do these rapid verdicts serve us, or do they bind us to illusions we never question? Let us return to our two strangers on the street corner. Suppose they meet again, days later, in a quiet cafe. The woman, still carrying the memory of his tired eyes, speaks to him with a gentleness she might not have offered another. The man, recalling her faint smile, opens up in a way he seldom does, sharing fragments of a life marked by quiet loss. Their interaction unfolds not as a blank slate, but as a canvas already brushed with the colors of that first glance. And yet, beneath these impressions, there are depths neither can yet see. Her own hidden struggles, his unspoken hopes. How much of who they are to each other is shaped not by truth, but by the silent assumptions born in a moment's passing. There is a delicate irony here in how the mind clings to these first impressions as if they were anchors, when in truth they are more like veils, thin, translucent, but enough to obscure the fuller picture. We are drawn to certainty, to the comfort of quick understanding, yet in doing so, we risk missing the slow, unfolding beauty of another's complexity. What might happen if we trained ourselves to hold these initial thoughts lightly, as mere whispers rather than declarations? What if we approached each new encounter with the patience to let the deeper story emerge, layer by layer, like the gradual light of dawn? As we linger on this thought, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a crowded square watching countless faces pass by. Each one carries a first impression in your mind, a fleeting judgment formed before you even realize it. Some you dismiss, others draw you in, all based on fragments of expression or gesture. But behind each face lies a world you cannot yet know, a tapestry of joys and sorrows woven over a lifetime. Take a moment to reflect on this. How many stories have you missed, simply because a first glance told you all you thought you needed to know? And how might the world shift if you looked, again with eyes open to the unseen? Imagine for a moment a quiet library tucked away in the heart of an ancient city. Its shelves tower like the walls of a fortress, brimming with tomes of knowledge, each page a brick in an impenetrable structure of thought. Within this sanctuary wanders a scholar, a man of insatiable curiosity, his eyes alight with the conviction that he has uncovered the truths of the world. He builds his understanding meticulously, stacking idea upon idea, crafting a citadel of belief so sturdy that no storm of doubt could ever breach its walls. Yet, as the years pass, a whisper begins to echo through the silent halls of his mind, a murmur of unease, a suggestion that the fortress he has built might not be as unassailable as it seems. This scholar, you see, is not unlike any of us. He seeks the comfort of certainty, the warmth of ideas that align with what he already holds dear. He leafs through volumes that sing in harmony with his convictions, nodding as they affirm what he has long believed to be true. A passage that praises His worldview is underlined with fervor. A theory that mirrors his own is scribbled in the margins with triumph. But when a book dares to challenge his foundation, when it presents a perspective that clashes with the architecture of his mind, he sets it aside with a furrowed brow, dismissing it as flawed, irrelevant, or simply wrong. He does not linger on the dissonance. Instead, he returns to the familiar, to the echoes of his own thoughts reflected back at him, as if the very walls of his library were designed to amplify only the sounds he wishes to hear. And so, his fortress grows. But it is a peculiar kind of growth. It expands not outward into the vastness of possibility, but inward, tightening its boundaries, narrowing its halls. The scholar becomes a prisoner of his own making, surrounded by a choir of agreement, deaf to the distant voices that might offer a different melody. He does not see that the bricks he so carefully chooses are not the strongest or the truest, but merely the ones that fit most neatly into the structure he has already built. He is blind to the cracks forming in the foundation, to the light of alternative truths seeping through, because to acknowledge them would mean dismantling a piece of the very edifice he has spent a lifetime constructing. Consider for a moment how often we, too, walk these same narrow corridors. How often do we seek out only the news that confirms our suspicions, the voices that nod in agreement with our deepest held beliefs? We scroll through endless streams of information, yet somehow, we always seem to land on the stories that reinforce what we already think we know. A fleeting headline that challenges us is swiped away. A conversation that unsettles us is quietly avoided. We build our own fortresses, brick by brick, curating a reality that feels safe, predictable, and affirming. But at what cost? What vast landscapes of understanding do we miss when we refuse to step beyond the walls we've erected? Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time you truly listened to a perspective that made you uncomfortable? Not with the intent to refute it, but to understand it. The scholar in our story, after many years, begins to sense the weight of his isolation. One evening, as the sun dips low and casts long shadows across his library, he stumbles upon a forgotten text buried beneath a pile of familiar works. Its pages are worn, its words sharp and unfamiliar, cutting against the grain of everything he has built. At first, he recoils, ready to return it to the dust. But something, a flicker of curiosity perhaps, or a weariness of the same old echoes, compels him to read on. Line by line, he feels the ground beneath his fortress tremble. The ideas within are not comforting. They do not fit neatly into his structure. Yet, they carry a strange resonance, a truth that cannot be so easily dismissed. For the first time, in years, he wonders if the walls he has crafted are not a shelter, but a cage. This moment, fragile and fleeting, is where the possibility of growth begins. To see beyond the echo chamber is to invite a kind of vulnerability, a willingness to let the walls crack, to let the unfamiliar seep in. It is not an easy path. The scholar's hands tremble as he turns the pages, his mind wrestling with the discomfort of doubt. But in that discomfort lies a quiet liberation, a chance to rebuild on a foundation not of selective truths, but of a broader, messier, more honest reality. And so, we might ask ourselves, are we brave enough to seek out the books that unsettle us? To listen to the whispers we've long ignored? Or will we remain within our fortresses, safe but confined, hearing only the echoes of what we already believe? Take a moment to reflect on this. Imagine the walls of your own mind, the ideas you've stacked so carefully over time. Is there a forgotten text, a challenging thought waiting to be uncovered? As the night deepens and the world grows still, let this question linger, not as a judgment, but as an invitation, a gentle nudge to step beyond the familiar and glimpse the vastness that lies just outside your own carefully built walls. Imagine a stranger stepping into a room, their smile radiant, their voice smooth as silk, their presence almost magnetic. In that fleeting moment, something in you shifts. A quiet conviction forms that this person must be kind, wise, even trustworthy. You've only just met them, yet a golden light seems to surround them, softening every edge, hiding every flaw. But what if this glow is not theirs at all, but a creation of your own mind, a deceptive shimmer cast by a single striking trait? Welcome to the subtle trap of the halo effect, where beauty, or any singular charm, can blind us to the shadows that linger beneath. Let's linger on this idea for a while, like watching the slow dance of candlelight against a wall. The halo effect is an ancient trick of perception, one that has woven itself into the fabric of human interaction since time immemorial. Think of the kings and queens of old, draped in finery, their very appearance commanding reverence. A crown, a velvet robe, a steady gaze, these were enough to convince entire kingdoms of divine right, of unerring wisdom. Yet how often did those glittering exteriors mask cruelty, incompetence, or frailty? History whispers to us of emperors whose beauty or charisma cloaked their tyranny, their subjects unable to see past the halo, unwilling to question the light. Now picture a man named Elias, a figure who walks into a small village square one autumn evening. His laughter rings like a bell. His eyes hold a spark of mischief and warmth, and when he speaks, every head turns. He's a storyteller, or so he claims, weaving tales of distant lands with such vividness that children and elders alike hang on his every word. To the villagers, Elias is more than a passing traveler. He's a sage, a friend, a confidant. They invite him into their homes, share their meager harvests, and even seek his counsel on matters of the heart and land. Why? Because that first impression, that initial burst of charm, has painted him in hues of perfection. His flaws, perhaps a tendency to embellish, a restlessness that hints at secrets, go unnoticed. Buried beneath the golden veil his charisma has spun. But let's step closer, beyond the surface of Elias's allure. What if his stories are not just embellished, but entirely fabricated? What if his warmth is a practiced mask, worn to win trust for reasons unspoken? The villagers, caught in the halo's glow, miss the inconsistencies in his tales, the way his eyes dart when pressed for truth. They attribute his evasiveness to mystery, even depth, rather than deceit. And here lies the quiet danger of this mental illusion. One positive trait, be it beauty, eloquence, or confidence, can stretch far beyond its bounds, coloring our judgment of an entire person. We see what we wish to see, not what is. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever met someone whose presence seemed to light up a room, only to later discover a side of them that didn't match the initial shine? Or perhaps you've been the one casting a halo, projecting an image of flawlessness onto a friend, a leader, or a lover, until reality gently or harshly peeled it away. How often do we let a single gleam of light blind us to the full spectrum of a person's character? This isn't merely a quirk of the mind. It's a lens through which we navigate a world brimming with first impressions. Consider the implications in our daily lives. How a polished speaker sways a crowd, not with substance but with style. How a striking face in a photograph earns trust before a word is spoken. The halo effect whispers to us that beauty equals goodness, that charm equals integrity, and we listen, often without realizing the whisper isn't truth, but a seductive echo of our own making. It's a reminder of how fragile our perceptions can be, how easily swayed by the superficial, even as we pride ourselves on depth. And so, as we linger on Elias and his village, let's ponder the unseen weight of this illusion. The villagers may never see beyond his halo, may never question the man behind the mask. But we, standing at a distance, can ask ourselves, what halos are we casting in our own lives? Whose flaws are we overlooking because of a smile, a kind word, a fleeting moment of brilliance? And perhaps most hauntingly, what shadows of our own are hidden beneath the halos others place upon us? Let these questions drift with you, like leaves on a quiet stream, as we rest in the mystery of how deeply and how deceptively beauty can shape the way we see the world. Imagine for a moment that you're standing at the edge of a bustling marketplace, the air thick with the scent of spices and the murmur of bartering voices. Amidst the crowd, a merchant calls out a price for a simple clay pot, a figure so astronomical it almost seems absurd. Yet, as the day wears on, you watch as buyers approach, haggle, and eventually settle on a sum that, while lower, still feels far too steep for such an ordinary item. Why, you wonder? Do they agree to this? What invisible force tethers their minds to that first outrageous number, pulling their judgment like a ship bound to a dock? This is the subtle trap of anchoring, a quiet trick of the mind where the first piece of information we encounter becomes a reference point, a fixed star by which we navigate all that follows. It's not just in markets or negotiations where this happens. It weaves its way into the fabric of our daily decisions, often without a whisper of awareness. That first number, that initial idea, plants itself deep within us, and everything afterward is measured against it, as though it holds some inherent truth. But does it? Or are we merely deceived by the weight of first impressions, unable to break free from the harbor of that starting point? Consider the merchant again, his voice cutting through the clamor with calculated precision. He knows the game. That first price isn't meant to be final. It's a deliberate anchor, cast out, to shape the waters of perception. When the buyer counters, they believe they've won a victory, unaware that their bargain is still far from fair. The mind, in its desire for coherence, clings to that initial figure as a benchmark, unable to see how arbitrary it truly is. It's a curious thing, isn't it? How a single number, thrown into the air like a stone into a still pond, can send ripples through our reasoning, distorting the surface of what we believe to be rational. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have there been times in your own life when a first offer, a first opinion, or even a first fleeting thought became the lens through which you saw everything else? Perhaps in a conversation where someone's opening statement framed the entire debate, or in a choice where the first option seemed, somehow, to carry more weight than the rest. We rarely notice the anchor as it's dropped. Its presence is quiet, almost ghostly, yet it holds us in place with a strength we underestimate. This phenomenon stretches beyond mere numbers or transactions. It reaches into the very way we form beliefs about the world. Imagine a child hearing a story for the first time, a tale of heroes and villains, of right and wrong. That first narrative becomes an anchor, a foundation upon which they build their understanding of morality, of justice. Years later, even as new stories emerge, as complexities and contradictions surface, that initial tale lingers, coloring their perspective in ways they may never fully unravel. Is it possible, then, that much of what we hold as true is merely the shadow of the first idea we encountered, rather than a truth we've discovered for ourselves? There's a certain mystery in this, a quiet unease in realizing how much of our thinking is shaped not by deliberation, but by the accident of what came first. History offers us a glimpse of this on a grander scale. Think of the early astronomers who anchored their understanding of the cosmos to the idea that the Earth was the center of all things. Every observation, every calculation was bent to fit this first assumption, even as the stars themselves whispered a different truth. It took centuries and the courage to let go of that anchor, to see the universe as it truly is. What anchors, I wonder, are we still tethered to today? Ideas or beliefs so deeply embedded that we cannot imagine cutting the rope. As the sun dips low over that imagined marketplace, the merchant counts his earnings, a faint smile playing on his lips. He understands the human mind better than many of us do. He knows that the first number isn't just a starting point. It's a trap, a silent force that bends our will without a sound. And as the crowd disperses, as the day fades into twilight, the question lingers in the air like a half-forgotten dream. How often do we sail our thoughts by an anchor we didn't choose, mistaking it for the horizon? Let that thought drift with you for a while as the night deepens and the world grows still. Imagine a moment of profound decision, a crossroads where life itself hangs in the balance. A doctor stands before a trembling patient, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of what must be said. He speaks of a procedure, a chance to save a life, but the words he chooses are not mere vessels of fact. They are sculptors of reality. In one breath, he offers hope. There is a 90% chance of survival. In another, he casts a shadow. There is a 10% chance of death. The numbers remain the same, yet the air in the room shifts, as if the very walls lean closer to listen. Which framing will the patient cling to? Which will carve the path forward? This is the subtle, almost invisible power of the framing effect, a quiet force that shapes how we see the world, not through the raw truth, but through the lens of how that truth is presented. It is as though our minds are not calculators of logic, but artists of perception, painting the same scene in hues of light or darkness based on the brushstrokes of words. A glass half full or half empty is not just a cliché. It is a window into how deeply language can sway us. The same reality, draped in different terms, can ignite hope or summon dread, can spur action or paralyze with fear. Why is it that a single shift in phrasing can alter the course of a life? Consider the patient once more, sitting in that sterile room, heart pounding like a drum in the silence. When survival is the frame, the mind grasps at the promise of life, envisioning days yet to come, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the laughter of loved ones. But when death is the frame, a chill creeps in, and the imagination stumbles into darker corners. Final breaths, empty chairs, unspoken goodbyes. The odds have not changed, yet the emotional weight has shifted, as if the words themselves carry a gravity stronger than the facts. It is not merely a choice of language, it is a choice of worlds. This phenomenon stretches far beyond hospital walls. Think of a merchant in a bustling market, his voice weaving through the crowd as he describes a humble object. He might call it a rare treasure, conjuring images of uniqueness and value, or a final piece, stirring urgency and fear of loss. The object remains unchanged, a simple trinket of wood or stone, but the story spun around it transforms its worth. In the buyer's eyes, our decisions, it seems, are less about the thing itself and more about the narrative that cloaks it. Are we truly deciding, or are we merely dancing to the tune of someone else's words? Take a moment to reflect on this. Have there been times in your own life when the way something was presented altered your path? Perhaps a warning framed as a challenge spurred you to act, or a risk framed as a loss held you back. How often do we pause to question the frame itself, to peel back the layers of language and see the bare truth beneath? History, too, whispers of framing's silent power. In times of war, leaders have long known that the same battle can be sold as a noble sacrifice or a tragic waste, depending on the words chosen to rally the masses. A retreat can be a strategic withdrawal or a cowardly flight. A rebellion can be a fight for freedom or an act of chaos. The events remain fixed in time, etched into the past, yet their meaning bends and sways with the storyteller's voice. It makes one wonder, do we ever grasp reality as it is, or only as it is framed for us? There is a quiet mystery here, a riddle woven into the fabric of our minds. If words can so profoundly shape our perception, where does the boundary lie between influence and manipulation? Are we ever free from the frames others build around us, or even those we build for ourselves? Perhaps the first step is simply to listen, not just to the message, but to the melody of how it is sung. To notice when hope is dangled before us, or when fear is whispered in our ear. To ask not just what is being said, but why it is said in that way. As the night deepens and the world grows still, let this thought linger like a faint echo in the quiet. Our minds are not passive observers. They are gardens where words plant seeds, shaping the landscape of our choices and beliefs. Some seeds bloom as courage, others as doubt. And in this delicate interplay, we might begin to wonder, are we the gardeners or are we the soil? Imagine, for a moment, a quiet room filled with relics of a life once lived. A dusty shelf lined with trinkets, each one a fragment of a story, a memory, a fleeting joy. Among them, sits an old, tarnished locket, its chain broken, its clasp rusted, shut. It holds no value to anyone else, not even a whisper of beauty in its worn edges. Yet to the one who owns it, it is a treasure beyond measure. Why does the heart cling so fiercely to what others might discard without a second thought? Why does the mere thought of letting go feel like a wound, deeper than the promise of something new? This is the quiet pull of loss aversion, an invisible force woven into the fabric of our being, guiding us to fear the emptiness of loss far more than we yearn for the possibility of gain. It is as if we are born with an unspoken pact to guard what we have, to shield it from the winds of change, even when what we hold no longer serves us. Consider the collector in our story, a man named Elias, whose home is a museum of forgotten things. His shelves groan under the weight of chipped porcelain dolls, faded postcards, and cracked vinyl records, each item a tether to a moment he cannot bear to release. To an outsider, these are mere objects, clutter in a life that could breathe, freer without them. But to Elias, they are anchors, each one a bulwark against the tide of time that threatens to wash away who he once was. Years ago, that locket belonged to someone he loved, a fleeting romance that ended in a whisper, not a storm. It was a gift, a small token of a summer evening under a sky painted with stars. The love faded, as such things often do, but the locket remained, a silent sentinel of what might have been. To part with it would be to part with the memory itself, to admit that the past has no claim on the present. And so, he keeps it, along with 100 other relics, each one a brick in the wall he builds against loss. Even when a friend offers to trade a handful of these worn trinkets for a painting, vibrant and new, Elias hesitates. The painting promises beauty, a fresh chapter, but the thought of surrendering even one of his possessions gnaws at him. A quiet panic he cannot name. Is this not a mirror of our own lives? How often do we cling to what we know, not because it brings us joy, but because the alternative, the void left behind, feels too vast to face? Think of the job we stay in, long after passion has withered, simply because walking away means losing the security we've built, or the relationships we hold on to, even as they fray, because the ache of their absence seems heavier than the strain of their presence. Our minds whisper to us that what we have, however flawed, is a certainty, while what lies beyond is a gamble, a shadow of risk we dare not confront. Take a moment to reflect on this. Is there something in your own life that you hold too tightly, not for its worth, but for the fear of what letting go might mean? Perhaps it is a possession, a memory, or a belief you've outgrown. Yet the thought of releasing it stirs a quiet dread. Why does loss weigh so much heavier on the scale of our emotions than the promise of gain? This instinct, this aversion to loss, is not merely a quirk of character. It is etched into the very wiring of our minds, a remnant of a time when survival depended on guarding every scrap we possessed. In a world of scarcity, to lose a tool, a shelter, or a bond could mean the difference between life and death, and so we evolved to feel the sting of loss as a visceral warning, a sharper pain than the quiet hope of something better. But in a world no longer defined by such immediate peril, this ancient reflex can bind us, turning our lives into museums of the past, where every exhibit is a weight we carry, rather than a joy we celebrate. Elias, our collector, stands at the threshold of his cluttered room each evening, gazing at the shelves with a mix of reverence and weariness. He wonders, in the stillness, if the locket still holds the laughter of that summer night, or if it is merely a shell, a hollow echo of a feeling he no longer needs. He imagines sometimes a life unburdened by these relics, a home with open spaces where light falls freely on empty walls. Yet the step to release them feels like a leap into an abyss, a surrender to a grief he cannot predict. And so, he lingers, caught between the comfort of the known and the mystery of what might be. Perhaps this is the truest riddle of loss aversion, not that we fear losing, but that we fear the unknown self we might become without the things we clutch so tightly. What would it mean to let go? To trust that the emptiness left behind could be filled with something new, something unforeseen. As the night deepens and the world grows quiet, consider the weight of what you carry. Is it a treasure or is it a chain? And if it is the latter, might there be a courage hidden within to lay it down and step into the vast, uncharted promise of tomorrow? Imagine for a moment that you're standing at the edge of a vast, crumbling structure, a once grand edifice of dreams and ambition, now weathered by time and neglect. Its walls are cracked, its foundation unsteady, yet you remain, pouring your heart and soul into mending what seems beyond repair. Why do you stay? What invisible chain binds you to this broken endeavor, even as the years slip through your fingers like grains of sand? Tonight, let us wander into the quiet, shadowy realm of the mind's stubborn persistence, where the past becomes a trap we cannot escape. There is a peculiar weight to the things we've invested in, be it time, effort, or hope. It's as if each hour spent, each ounce of energy given, weaves a thread that ties us ever tighter to the object of our labor. Consider the story of a dreamer named Elias, a man who once envisioned a magnificent creation, a novel that would capture the essence of the human spirit. He began with fervor, scribbling late into the night, his pages filled with raw, unpolished brilliance. But as the years dragged on, the spark dimmed. The story grew tangled, the words hollow. Friends urged him to set it aside, to start anew with fresh eyes. Yet Elias could not let go. "I've given 10 years to this," he would say, his voice heavy with the burden of time. "To abandon it now would be to lose a part of myself." And so he pressed on, not out of passion, but out of an unspoken obligation to the past, a past that held him captive. This is the silent force at work within us, often without our awareness. We call it the sunk cost fallacy, a quirk of the mind that whispers we must continue, simply because we've already given so much. It's not logic that drives us here, but something deeper, almost primal. It's the fear of admitting that our efforts might have been in vain, that the time we've spent cannot be reclaimed. Like a gambler who throws good money after bad, convinced the next bet will turn their luck, we cling to failing ventures, relationships, or dreams, unable to see that the true loss lies not in walking away, but in staying tethered to what no longer serves us. Take a moment to reflect on this. Is there something in your own life, a project, a choice, a lingering commitment, that you hold on to, not for its future promise, but for the weight of what you've already poured into it? Let us drift back to Elias for a moment, standing in the dim light of his cluttered study, surrounded by stacks of yellowed pages. Each sheet is a monument to a younger self, a man brimming with certainty that this work would define him. To abandon it feels like betraying that younger Elias, as if letting go would erase the years of struggle and make them meaningless. But what if meaning isn't found in the outcome, but in the courage to release what no longer fits? What if true freedom lies not in finishing every path we start, but in recognizing when to step onto a new one? These questions linger in the air, soft as a whisper, as we watch Elias sit at his desk, pen in hand, wrestling with a choice he cannot yet name. History, too, is littered with echoes of this human tendency. Think of empires that poured endless resources into wars they could not win, generals who refused to retreat because too much blood had already been spilled, or consider the countless inventors who chased flawed designs to their ruin, unable to pivot because their identity had fused with their first idea. It's a story as old as time, etched into the very fabric of our being, our reluctance to let the past rest, even when it drags us into the mire. Yet, there is a quiet beauty in this flaw, isn't there? It speaks to our capacity for loyalty, for perseverance, for a kind of stubborn hope that refuses to surrender. But at what cost does this hope come? As the night deepens, let us linger on this thought a little longer. Picture yourself as Elias, or perhaps as someone in your own memory, standing before a crumbling endeavor of your own making. Feel the weight of the years, the invisible threads of time that bind you to this place. What would it mean to loosen your grip, to let the structure fall, not as a failure, but as an act of grace? What new horizons might open if you allowed yourself to walk away, carrying only the lessons, not the burden? Take a moment to reflect on this. Let the silence hold you as you ponder the chains of the past and the quiet strength it takes to set them down. For in the end, the mind's trap is not the investment itself, but the story we tell ourselves about it. We are not bound by time spent, but by the fear of what letting go might say about us. Yet, in the stillness of this moment, there is a whisper of possibility, a chance to rewrite that story, to see that every ending is merely the seed of a new beginning, waiting patiently for us to turn the page. Imagine for a moment a bustling square at the heart of an ancient city, just as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. The air hums with the chatter of merchants, the clatter of carts, and the laughter of children weaving through the crowd. Amidst this lively chaos, a single figure, a weary traveler perhaps, pauses in the center of the square. Without a word, without reason, he tilts his head back and gazes upward, eyes fixed on the empty twilight sky. A passerby notices, slows, and mirrors his gesture, searching the heavens for something unseen. Then another joins, and another, until dozens stand frozen, necks craned, staring at nothing at all. What compels them to follow? What invisible thread ties their gaze to his, binding them to a curiosity that may not even be their own? This is the subtle, almost mystical force of social proof, a whisper from the herd that shapes our actions more than we dare to admit. We are creatures of connection, woven into the fabric of those around us, often unaware of how deeply the crowd sways our choices. In that square, no one questions why they look up. No one dares to break the silent agreement, the unspoken pact that if so many others see something worth seeing, then surely it must be true. But what if there is nothing there? What if the first gaze was a whim, a fleeting distraction, and yet it rippled outward, pulling others into its orbit like a stone dropped into still water? Consider how often we follow without asking why. In the rush of daily life, we glance at the long line outside a restaurant and assume it must be the best in town, never pausing to wonder if those waiting were simply drawn by the same illusion. We scroll through endless reviews, swayed by the sheer number of voices, even if their words ring hollow. We see a trend sweep through our circles and adopt it, not out of desire, but out of a quiet fear of standing apart. The herd's whisper is soft, almost imperceptible, yet it carries a weight that can bend our will before we even notice the burden. This pull is ancient, etched into our very being by a time when survival depended on the group. To stray from the tribe was to risk isolation, danger, even death. So, we learn to watch, to mimic, to align ourselves with the many, trusting that their collective wisdom would shield us from harm. But in a world no longer defined by predators lurking in the shadows, does this instinct still serve us? Or does it lead us, like those in the square, to stare at empty skies, chasing phantoms simply because others do? Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time you followed the crowd without hesitation? Did you feel the quiet nudge of belonging, the comfort of being one of many? Or did a flicker of doubt stir within you, only to be silenced by the ease of conformity? The mystery deepens when we realize how rarely we question this force. It operates beneath the surface, a current we rarely see until we're already swept along. The traveler in the square didn't shout or beckon. His mere action was enough. And so it is with much of our lives. Subtle cues, unspoken agreements, a glance or a nod that tells us where to turn, what to value, whom to trust. Yet in this silent dance, do we lose something of ourselves? Do we surrender our own compass, letting the herd chart our course while we believe the choice was ours? There is no judgment here, only curiosity. To be human is to seek connection, to find solace in the shared rhythm of others. But perhaps there is a quiet power in pausing, in stepping back from the throng to ask, am I looking up because I see something worth seeing, or because I fear to be the only one looking down? In the stillness of that question, we might hear a different whisper, not of the crowd, but of our own voice, faint at first, but growing clearer with each deliberate step we take beyond the herd's shadow. Imagine a quiet village nestled at the foot of a misty mountain, where the air hums with the weight of tradition and the cobblestone paths echo with whispers of unquestioned faith. In this place, a single voice rises above the rest, a voice cloaked in certainty, draped in the illusion of wisdom. The villagers, bound by an ancient instinct, turn their eyes to this figure, a self-proclaimed leader who wears no crown but carries the authority of one. They listen, they follow, and they trust, even as a quiet tremor of doubt stirs in the deepest corners of their hearts. Why do we so readily surrender our judgment to those who claim to know the way? What is it within us that bows before the robe of authority, even when the path it leads us down feels shadowed and uncertain? In this village, the leader speaks with a fervor that fills the square, his words painting visions of prosperity and protection. He points to the mountain and declares it a source of danger, a lurking threat that only he can shield them from. His voice, steady and commanding, weaves a spell over the crowd. Hands that once tended fields now clench in fear. Eyes that once gazed at the mountain with quiet awe now see only peril. And so, they build walls at his command. They ration their grain at his decree, and they whisper his name with a reverence that borders on worship. Yet, in the stillness of night, when the leader's voice fades into the wind, a few lie awake, staring at the ceiling of their modest homes. A question gnaws at them, faint but persistent. What if the mountain holds no threat at all? What if this authority, so confidently worn, is nothing more than a mask? This is the subtle power of authority bias, a thread woven deep into the fabric of our minds. We are drawn to those who stand tall, who speak with conviction, as if their certainty alone is proof of truth. It is an instinct older than villages or mountains, born in a time when survival depended on following the strongest, the loudest, the one who seemed to know. But in a world far more complex than our ancestors could have dreamed, this instinct can lead us astray. History whispers of emperors and generals, of priests and politicians, whose robes of authority cloaked not wisdom, but ambition, or worse, ignorance. Think of the countless times humanity has marched blindly behind a confident voice, only to find itself at the edge of a cliff. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever followed a voice simply because it sounded sure, even when your own heart murmured a different tune? In our village, the leader's influence grows, his decrees shaping not just actions, but thoughts. A young woman whose hands once wove baskets with a quiet pride now hesitates to speak her mind. She remembers a time before the leader came, when the mountain was a place of stories and wonder, not fear. But to question him would mean standing alone, defying the weight of every gaze in the square. So she lowers her eyes and nods, her doubt buried beneath the comfort of conformity. Another villager, an old man who has seen many winters, feels the same unease. He recalls leaders of the past, some wise, others reckless, and wonders if this one truly sees farther than the rest. Yet he too remains silent, tethered by the invisible chains of trust we place in those who claim to lead. What is it about authority that silences our inner voice? Is it fear of being wrong or fear of standing apart? Perhaps it is the comfort of relinquishing responsibility, of letting another bear the burden of choice. But in doing so, we risk losing something precious, our own compass, our own capacity to discern. The danger lies not just in following a flawed leader, but in forgetting that authority is often a garment, easily worn by anyone bold enough to claim it. In the quiet of this moment, consider the voices of authority in your own life. Are they guiding you toward clarity, or are they drowning out the whispers of your own truth? As the days pass in the village, a subtle shift begins. A child, too young to fear the weight of judgment, points to the mountain one morning and asks why they cannot climb it, why they cannot see for themselves what lies beyond. Her question hangs in the air, simple yet piercing, and for a fleeting moment, the leader's confident mask falters. Some villagers turn away, clutching tighter to their borrowed certainty, but others pause. They look at the mountain anew, its mist-shrouded peaks no longer a symbol of dread, but of mystery waiting to be unraveled. And in that pause, a seed of doubt, or perhaps of courage, takes root. This is the quiet rebellion against unearned trust, the slow awakening to the idea that authority, no matter how commanding, must be questioned. It is not a call to defy, for defiance's sake, but to remember that true guidance comes not from a robe or a title, but from a harmony between external voices and the quiet wisdom within us. As the night deepens over the village and the mountain looms silent and unknowable, let us linger on this thought. The most dangerous path is not always the one we are led down, but the one we follow without ever asking why. Take a moment to reflect on this and let the stillness carry you into the next layer of understanding. Imagine for a moment a dusty road stretching endlessly beneath a twilight sky, where a lone traveler walks with nothing but the weight of his thoughts. He's weary, his steps slow, when a stranger emerges from the shadowed edge of the path. The stranger offers a small, simple gift, a carved wooden token, no larger than a coin, etched with a faint spiral. The traveler hesitates, sensing no malice, and accepts it with a nod of gratitude. But as he slips the token into his pocket, something shifts within him, an invisible thread tightening around his heart. He feels without words an unspoken debt, a need to repay what was given, though he never asked for it. This is the subtle, ancient force of reciprocity, a hidden rule woven into the fabric of our being, guiding us in ways we seldom notice. Let us linger on this idea, this quiet instinct that compels us to return what we've received, even when the scales are uneven. It's as old as humanity itself, born in the flickering light of ancient campfires, where survival depended on the balance of give and take. A shared meal, a lent tool, a moment of protection. These were not mere gestures, but bonds, unspoken contracts that held tribes together. To receive was to owe, and to owe was to be bound. But what happens when this instinct, so vital in its origin, lingers in a world far more complex? What happens when a small kindness traps us in a cycle we didn't choose? Picture our traveler, again, now sitting by a roadside fire, the wooden token resting in his palm. Days have passed since the stranger's gift, yet its presence gnaws at him. He feels an urge, almost a duty, to find the stranger and offer something in return. But the stranger is long gone, vanished into the dusk. So when another figure approaches, a merchant with a weathered cart, the traveler seizes the chance. He offers more than he can spare, a pouch of coins, a woven cloth, all for a trinket of little worth. The merchant, sensing the desperation, accepts with a knowing smile. The traveler walks away, lighter in possessions but heavier in spirit, still bound by a debt he can't name. Why does a small act of generosity wield such power over us? Why do we feel compelled to repay, even at a cost to ourselves? This is the enigma of reciprocity. It's not merely a social courtesy, but a deep-seated impulse, etched into our minds by millennia of mutual reliance. We are wired to mirror kindness, to balance the ledger of human connection. Yet, in its quiet insistence, it can become a chain. A favor accepted at a dinner table might draw us into obligations we resent. A colleague's help might pull us into alliances we'd rather avoid. We give back not always out of gratitude, but out of an ancient, unspoken pressure. A fear of being seen as ungrateful, or worse, indebted. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever felt the weight of a kindness, the pull to repay it, even when it strained you? How often do we act not from choice, but from this invisible rule. Consider, too, how this instinct is wielded by those who understand its power. A merchant offers a free sample, knowing the taste will bind you to buy. A friend extends a favor, subtly expecting loyalty in return. Even in the grander tapestry of history, empires have gifted to conquer, lavish presents to smaller nations, only to demand tribute or allegiance later. Reciprocity, in its purest form, is a dance of mutual trust. But when manipulated, it becomes a snare, a debt that grows heavier with every step. Our traveler, long after parting with his coins, still feels the spiral of that wooden token in his thoughts, a reminder of a balance he can't restore. And so we walk this delicate line, caught between the beauty of giving and the burden of owing. Is there freedom in this cycle, or are we forever tethered to the gifts we accept? Perhaps the answer lies in awareness, in seeing the thread before it tightens, in choosing when to repay and when to let go. But for now, let us simply sit with this thought as the twilight deepens and the road stretches on, carrying whispers of debts both spoken and unseen. Imagine a bustling market at dusk, where the air hums with the chatter of vendors and the clinking of coins, a place alive with the pulse of human desire. Amidst the rows of colourful stalls, there is one small table, unremarkable at first glance, draped in a faded cloth. On it sits a single item, a plain clay jar, its surface rough and unglazed, nothing to catch the eye. Yet, a small handwritten sign beside it reads, "Last in stock." And suddenly, a crowd begins to gather, their murmurs rising like a tide. Why does this ordinary object, moments ago invisible, now burn with an allure that pulls at every passerby? What is it about the whisper of scarcity that transforms the mundane into the coveted? This is the subtle, almost magical force of scarcity at play. A trick of the mind that weaves an illusion of rare value around things that might otherwise go unnoticed. We are drawn, almost instinctively, to what seems out of reach, as if the mere idea of losing our chance to possess it ignites a primal urgency within us. That clay jar in the market, so easily overlooked in abundance, becomes a treasure when it stands alone, the last of its kind. Its worth is no longer tied to its craftsmanship or utility, but to the story of its rarity, a story our minds eagerly write and believe. Think back to a time when you felt this pull. Perhaps it was a fleeting opportunity, a limited offer, or a fleeting glimpse of something you were told you might never see again. Did your heart quicken? Did the object or moment take on a glow it didn't have before? Scarcity, whether real or carefully crafted, taps into a deep well of human emotion, a fear of missing out, a longing to secure what might soon slip through our fingers. It's as though we are hardwired to chase the rare, to hoard the fleeting, as if possessing it might shield us from the uncertainty of loss. But let us linger on this thought for a moment. Is the value we place on the scarce truly rooted in the thing itself? Or is it a mirage born of our own perception? History whispers to us of tulip mania in the 17th century, when a single bulb, deemed rare and exotic, was traded for the price of a grand house in Holland. Fortunes were made and lost over fragile petals, not because of their inherent beauty, but because scarcity painted them as treasures beyond measure. The tulips did not change, but the story around them did. A story of limited supply, of fleeting chance, a story that drove men to madness. Take a moment to reflect on this. How often do we chase shadows of value, mistaking the illusion of scarcity for true worth? Consider, too, how this illusion is woven into the fabric of our daily lives, often by design. A merchant might limit stock to create a buzz, or a storyteller might hint that a tale will be told only once, drawing us closer with the promise of exclusivity. We see it in the language of urgency. Act now, while supplies last, one of a kind. Words that stir a quiet panic in our souls, compelling us to reach out before the chance is gone. And yet, how often do we pause to ask if what we desire is truly rare, or if we've simply been caught in a carefully spun web of want? There is a deeper question here, one that tugs at the edges of our understanding. Does scarcity reveal our longing for uniqueness, a need to stand apart by claiming what few others can? Or does it expose a quieter fear, a dread of being left behind, of watching others grasp what we cannot? Perhaps it is both, a dance between aspiration and anxiety, played out in the marketplace of our minds. That clay jar, sitting alone on its faded cloth, becomes a mirror, reflecting not just our desires, but the stories we tell ourselves about what we lack. As the market grows quieter and the crowd around the stall begins to thin, the jar remains, its sign still proclaiming its singularity. Some will walk away, their curiosity sated, while others will clutch their purchase, convinced they've secured something irreplaceable. But in the stillness, we might wonder if the true scarcity lies not in the object, but in the moments we spend chasing illusions, overlooking the abundance that surrounds us. Take a moment to reflect on this. What rare treasures have you pursued, only to find their value was never in their scarcity, but in the meaning you gave them? Let this thought linger as the twilight deepens over the market, as the clamor fades into whispers. The illusion of rare value is a quiet force, shaping our choices in ways we rarely see. But in recognizing it, in stepping back from the frenzy of want, we might begin to discern what truly matters. Not the last item on the table, but the unseen riches we already hold. Imagine for a moment that the world around you is not quite as it seems, that a single thought, a fleeting word, or a passing idea can weave itself into the fabric of your reality, making the invisible suddenly vivid. There is a strange phenomenon, an eerie quirk of the mind, where something once obscure begins to appear everywhere, as if the universe itself is conspiring to draw your attention to it. It's as though the moment you learn of something rare, it emerges from the shadows, whispering to you from every corner. Have you ever felt this? A name, a concept, a fleeting detail that once noticed seems to haunt your every step. Let me tell you a story of a man named Elias, a quiet soul who lived in a small, unremarkable town nestled between rolling hills. One grey morning, while sifting through the dusty pages of an old book in a forgotten library, he stumbled upon a word he had never encountered before: serendipity. It struck him, this delicate term for finding something beautiful by accident. He rolled it over in his mind, letting its syllables linger like a melody. It felt like a secret, a hidden gem unearthed from the depths of language. He closed the book, carried the word with him, and stepped back into the world. But something peculiar began to happen. That very afternoon, as he walked through the market, he overheard a merchant laugh and say to a customer, "What a bit of serendipity, finding this just when you needed it." Elias froze, his breath catching. Had he misheard? He shook it off as mere chance and continued on. Yet, by evening, as he sat in a dimly lit tavern, a bard strummed a tune and sang of serendipity in a lover's glance. The word echoed in his ears, sharper now, almost taunting. Over the next few days, it seemed to follow him, etched in a letter from a friend, murmured in a conversation between strangers on a train, even scrawled in chalk on a pavement he passed each morning. It was as if the world had conspired to paint this word across his reality, a riddle he couldn't escape. Elias began to wonder, had this word always been there, lingering just beyond his notice, waiting for the moment he awakened to it? Or was his mind playing tricks, bending the chaos of the world into a pattern that wasn't truly there? He lay awake at night, tracing the question in the dark. Our attention, it seems, is a curious thing, a lantern that illuminates only what it chooses to see. Once something enters our awareness, does the world shift to meet it, or do we simply begin to notice what was always present, hidden in plain sight? This strange dance of perception is not mere coincidence, though it cloaks itself in mystery. It bears a name, the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, a quirk of the mind where a newly discovered idea or object seems to appear with uncanny frequency. But beneath the surface lies a deeper truth about how we experience reality. Our consciousness is not a passive mirror reflecting the world as it is. It is a sculptor, carving meaning from the raw stone of existence. When something captures our focus, it's as though a filter slips over our senses, tuning us to its frequency. Suddenly, what was once invisible becomes impossible to ignore. But are we seeing more of it, or are we simply seeing differently? Take a moment to reflect on this. Has there been a time in your life when a thought, a name, or an idea seemed to follow you, popping up in the most unexpected places? Was it the world speaking to you, or your own mind weaving a thread through the tapestry of chance? Consider, too, the implications of this phenomenon. If our attention can so easily reshape what we perceive, how much of our reality is constructed by the fleeting whims of our focus? Are there truths, beauties, or dangers lurking just beyond our notice, waiting for the right moment to be seen? And what of the opposite? How often do we overlook the familiar, the mundane, until something jolts us awake to its presence? Elias, in his quiet obsession with a single word, began to see not just serendipity, but the very nature of his own perception. He realized that his mind was both a window and a veil, revealing and obscuring in equal measure. There is a quiet unease in this realization, a whisper of mystery that lingers. If our awareness can conjure patterns from nothingness, what else might we be missing? What silent forces guide our gaze, deciding what we see and what remains unseen? As Elias wandered through his town, now haunted by a word he could not unhear, he felt the weight of a larger question. How much of what we call reality is merely a reflection of where we choose to look? And in the stillness of that thought, there is both wonder and a faint shiver, a reminder that the mind, for all its brilliance, is a labyrinth of illusions, where even the act of seeing is not always what it seems. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a battlefield, not of swords or soldiers, but of silent, invisible forces clashing in the shadows. A war rages within, often unnoticed, between what you hold to be true and what you find yourself doing. This inner conflict, this friction that grates against the soul, is not a mere fleeting discomfort. It is a profound struggle, one that shapes how we see ourselves and the world around us. What happens when our beliefs and actions refuse to align, when the heart whispers one truth while the hands carve another path? Let us wander into this quiet storm, into the realm of cognitive dissonance, where the mind bends and twists to shield us from the pain of contradiction. Picture a woman named Clara, who has always believed in the sanctity of honesty. From childhood, she was taught that truth is a pillar, an unshakable foundation upon which trust is built. Her words, she swore, would always reflect her integrity, no matter the cost. Yet, as life unfolded with its tangled webs, Clara found herself in a position where a lie seemed the kinder choice. A close friend, fragile and teetering on the edge of despair, asked for her opinion on a deeply personal matter. The truth, Clara knew, would wound, perhaps irreparably. So, with a heavy heart, she spoke words that were not her own, weaving a gentle falsehood to protect. In that moment, the ground beneath her shifted. Her values stood on one side, proud and unyielding, while her actions stood on the other, cloaked in necessity. The dissonance between them was a sharp, piercing note that echoed through her mind. This tension is not merely a fleeting pang of guilt, it is a deep, restless unease, a fracture in the self that demands resolution. Our minds, ever seeking harmony, cannot bear to hold two opposing truths for long. So, like an artist desperate to mend a cracked canvas, we begin to paint over the divide. Clara told herself that this lie was not a betrayal of her values, but an act of compassion. She reasoned that honesty, in its purest form, sometimes hurts more than it heals. She crafted justifications, layer upon layer, until the lie no longer felt like a lie, but a necessary shield. In doing so, she quieted the storm within, but at what cost? Had she reshaped her own truth, or merely buried it beneath a fragile illusion? Consider how often we do this in our own lives. How many times have we held a belief with iron conviction, only to act in ways that defy it, and then spun stories to ease the discord. Perhaps you vowed to live simply, to reject the pull of material excess, yet found yourself chasing possessions that promise fleeting joy. Or maybe you've prided yourself on fairness, only to bend the rules for someone dear, convincing yourself it was justified. The mind is a master of reconciliation, weaving intricate tapestries of excuse and rationale to protect us from the harsh light of self-awareness. But in smoothing over these cracks, do we grow wiser, or do we drift further from who we truly are? Take a moment to reflect on this. Is there a belief you hold dear that has been tested by your own choices? Can you feel the quiet friction of that inner war, the subtle ways you've sought to silence it? The concept of cognitive dissonance reveals a profound truth about our nature. We are not the steadfast beings we imagine ourselves to be. Our minds are malleable, bending under the weight of contradiction, reshaping reality to preserve a sense of coherence. Clara's story is not unique. It is a mirror to countless struggles within us all. The justifications we build are like bridges over turbulent waters, offering passage but never truly resolving the chaos beneath. And yet, there is something hauntingly human in this. Our capacity to adapt, to rationalize, is both a shield and a chain. It protects us from the pain of confronting our inconsistencies, but it also binds us to illusions that may keep us from growth. As we linger in this thought, consider the delicate dance between belief and action. What if the discomfort of dissonance is not a burden, but a signal, a quiet call to examine the gaps within ourselves? Clara, in time, might unravel the stories she told herself, facing the raw truth of her choice. She might find that honesty and compassion need not always clash, that there are paths through the storm she hadn't yet seen. And in that unraveling, there lies a kind of freedom, not in erasing the conflict, but in understanding it. So, as the night deepens and the world grows still, let us sit with this inner war, not to conquer it, but to listen. For in the quiet clash of our contradictions, we may just hear the whispers of who we are meant to become. Have you ever felt the weight of invisible eyes upon you, as if every step you take is being scrutinized by a silent, judging crowd? Imagine standing in a room full of strangers, your heart racing, convinced that every whisper, every fleeting glance is directed at you, dissecting your every flaw, every hesitation. This is the quiet trap of the mind, a phenomenon so subtle yet so pervasive that it shapes how we move through the world. It's called the spotlight effect, and it whispers to us that we are the center of everyone's attention, when in truth, we are often just a flicker in the periphery of their thoughts. Picture a young artist, barely out of his formative years, standing in a dimly lit gallery on the night of his first exhibition. His paintings line the walls, each stroke a piece of his soul laid bare. As the room fills with murmured conversations and the clinking of wine glasses, he feels a heat rising in his chest. Every pair of eyes seems to linger on him, not on his work, but on the tremble in his hands, the nervous shuffle of his feet, the way his voice cracks when he tries to explain his vision. He imagines their thoughts, sharp and critical, slicing through the air. Who does he think he is? They must be saying. Look at how out of place he seems. The weight of this imagined scrutiny pins him to the spot. His breath shallow, his mind racing with self-doubt. He is caught in a spotlight that only he can see, a beam of harsh light that follows him through every awkward gesture. But here's the quiet irony, the gentle twist that the mind conceals from us in these moments of vulnerability. As he stands there, frozen under his own gaze, the crowd around him barely notices his presence. A woman in a velvet dress sips her drink, lost in a conversation about her day. A man near the corner studies one of the paintings, wondering if it would match his living room decor, oblivious to the artist's nervous energy. Another guest checks their watch, preoccupied with a late meeting. The world, it seems, is not a stage where we are the sole performers. It is a tapestry of countless stories, each person wrapped in their own worries, their own distractions, their own fleeting thoughts. The spotlight our artist feels so intensely is nothing more than a phantom, a trick of the mind that amplifies our self-consciousness far beyond reality. Why do we fall into this illusion so easily? Perhaps it is because we are the protagonists of our own lives, the narrators of our own endless inner monologue. Every thought, every feeling, every stumble feels magnified to us, as if the world must surely see it too. We forget that others are equally consumed by their own narratives, their own private battles and fleeting joys. Our minds, in their attempt to protect us, or perhaps to prepare us for judgment, overestimate our visibility. It's as if we carry a mirror with us at all times, reflecting not just our image, but every perceived flaw, projecting it outward for all to see. Yet, in truth, that mirror often shows a reflection no one else bothers to look at. Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time you felt those invisible eyes upon you? Maybe it was a moment of embarrassment, a spilled drink at a party, a misspoken word in a meeting. Did you feel the room turn toward you, every gaze sharpening with judgment? And now, looking back, can you see how quickly that moment faded, how little it likely mattered to anyone else? The spotlight we imagine is rarely as bright as we believe. It dims with the realization that we are not the sole focus of the world's attention, that we are, in many ways, just another passing figure in the vast, distracted crowd of humanity. Consider the freedom hidden in this truth. If the eyes we fear are often blind to us, then what stops us from stepping forward with a little more courage, a little less hesitation? The artist in our gallery, trembling under his self-imposed spotlight, might have missed the quiet nod of appreciation from a stranger across the room, a nod that could have sparked a conversation, a connection. How many moments do we forfeit to this illusion, shrinking from the world when we could reach out, create, or simply be? The mind's trick here is not just a burden. It's a quiet invitation to let go, to step out of the imagined beam of judgment and into the softer, truer light of reality. As the gallery night wears on, our artist begins to notice this shift. He watches the crowd more closely, sees their distracted glances, their inward focus. Slowly, the heat in his chest cools. The spotlight fades. Not because the room has changed, but because he has begun to see it for what it is. A fleeting, crowded space where no one is truly watching as closely as he thought. His hands still tremble, but now he lets them, knowing that tremor is his alone to feel. And in that small act of release, he finds a quiet strength, a permission to stand as he is, unseen by the many, yet perhaps truly noticed by the few who matter. So, let this linger in your thoughts as the night deepens. We are rarely as exposed as we fear, rarely as judged as we imagine. The spotlight effect is a ghost of our own making, one we can learn to see through, to step beyond. What might you do? Who might you become if you let that phantom light dissolve into the gentle darkness of simply being? Imagine standing at the edge of an endless crossroads, where 100 paths stretch out before you, each one whispering a different promise. The air is thick with possibility, yet your feet remain rooted to the ground, unable to choose. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the myriad trails, and a quiet unease settles in your chest. Freedom, you thought, was the key to movement, to progress. But here, in this moment, it feels like a weight. How can something so liberating become a cage? This is the paradox of choice overload, a silent force that grips us when the abundance of options drowns out our ability to act. We are wanderers in a world of plenty, yet often find ourselves paralyzed, not by a lack of paths, but by their sheer number. Think of a marketplace where every stall offers a different fruit, each more vibrant than the last, and yet you leave empty-handed, haunted by the fear of choosing wrong. Or consider the quiet moments before sleep, when your mind sifts through 100 thoughts of what tomorrow could hold, only to settle on none, leaving you suspended in a restless limbo. There is a story of a traveler, much like us, who came upon such a crossroads in a forgotten land. His map was worn, his destination unclear, But the paths before him were endless. Some wound through misty valleys, others climbed jagged peaks, and a few disappeared into shadowy woods. Each held a promise, a potential, a dream. He stood there for hours, then days, tracing each route in his mind, imagining the wonders and perils that might lie beyond. Should he seek the safety of the valley or the triumph of the peak? Should he risk the unknown of the woods or turn back to the familiar? The more he pondered, the heavier his burden grew, until the very thought of choosing became a prison. Days turned to weeks, and still he stood, a statue of indecision, carved by the weight of too much freedom. What is it about abundance that can so easily bind us? Perhaps it is the fear of loss woven into every choice, the unspoken truth that to pick one path is to abandon all others. We are haunted by the ghosts of unchosen lives, the roads not taken, the fruits not tasted, and in that haunting, we freeze, as if standing still might preserve every possibility, even as time slips silently through our fingers. Or perhaps it is the illusion of perfection, the belief that among 100 options, there must be one that is flawless, if only we could find it. So we search, we weigh, we hesitate, until the moment to act has passed, and we are left with nothing but the ache of what might have been. Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time you stood at your own crossroads, overwhelmed by the sheer expanse of choice? Perhaps it was a decision as small as what to read next, or as vast as which path to carve for your future. Did you feel the weight of those unchosen roads pressing against you, whispering doubts into the quiet corners of your mind? This paralysis of plenty is not a modern affliction. It echoes through history, through the tales of kings who faltered when faced with too many strategies, and philosophers who wrestled with the infinite shades of truth. Even in ancient markets, where traders offered a dozen spices from distant lands, a buyer might walk away empty-handed, unable to settle on just one. The human mind, it seems, is wired for scarcity, for the clarity of limited options, and when confronted with abundance, it stumbles, caught in a web of its own making. Yet there is a quiet irony here. The same freedom that paralyzes us is also the source of our greatest potential. 100 paths mean 100 stories, 100 chances to become something new. But to step forward, we must release the need for certainty, for perfection. We must embrace the imperfection of choice, the beauty of not knowing what lies beyond the bend. The traveler at the crossroads, after weeks of stillness, finally took a trembling step, not because he knew the path was right, but because he understood that standing still was no longer a life. He chose, not with certainty, but with courage, and in that choice, he found movement, even if the destination remained a mystery. And so, as the twilight deepens and the world grows still, consider the crossroads in your own life. What paths stretch before you, whispering their promises and perils? What keeps you rooted, and what might set you free? There is no perfect choice, no flawless road, only the quiet act of stepping forward, of trusting that the journey itself holds meaning, even when the end remains unseen. Let that thought linger, like a soft breeze across an endless field of possibilities, as the night draws near. Imagine for a moment a small child, clutching a broken toy in their tiny hands, a little wooden horse with a chipped wheel, paint faded from countless sunny afternoons. To anyone else, it's a trinket destined for the dustbin, a relic of no value, easily replaced by something shiny and new. But to this child, it is a treasure beyond measure, a silent companion that has galloped through imaginary fields, braved unseen storms, and stood guard through quiet, lonely nights. Why does this broken thing hold such power over their heart? Why do we, in our own quiet ways, cling to the ordinary simply because it bears the imprint of our ownership? This invisible thread, this strange alchemy of possession, weaves itself into the fabric of our minds with a force we rarely notice. It's not just a child with a toy. It's the old chair in your living room, sagging and worn, that you can't bear to part with because it once held your grandmother's laughter. It's the scribbled note from a friend tucked away in a drawer that feels like a piece of your soul, though its words have long faded. We imbue these objects with a worth that transcends their material form, as if by owning them, we've breathed a part of ourselves into their very essence. But is this value real, or is it a mirage cast by our own attachment? Does the act of possession transform the mundane into the sacred, or are we merely fooling ourselves, trapped by a quiet illusion of the mind? Consider how this enchantment begins. The moment something becomes ours, a subtle shift occurs deep within us. It's as if a bond is forged, not just between us and the object, but between the object and our sense of self. That broken toy isn't just wood and paint to the child, it's a fragment of their story, a witness to their joys and sorrows. In their small hands, it becomes an extension of who they are, a mirror of their inner world. And so, when they're asked to give it up, it feels like surrendering a piece of their own heart. Haven't we all felt this at times? That quiet pang when we're forced to let go of something we've claimed as our own, even when we know, in the cold light of reason, that it holds no true worth. This phenomenon, this overvaluing of what we possess, stretches far beyond childhood, toys or sentimental keepsakes. Think of the artist who prices their first clumsy painting far above its skill, not because it rivals a masterpiece, but because it emerged from their own hands. Or the collector who hoards objects of little use, each piece glowing with an inflated worth simply because it sits on their shelf. Even in the realm of ideas, we see this shadow play out. How often do we defend our own opinions with a ferocity we'd never grant to another's, not because they're undeniably true, but because they're ours? Ownership, it seems, casts a spell, draping the ordinary in a veil of exaggerated value, blinding us to a clearer truth. But let's pause here and wonder, where does this impulse come from? Is it woven into our nature, a remnant of some ancient instinct to guard what we've claimed in a world of scarcity and threat? Or is it a quieter, more personal need? A desire to anchor ourselves in a fleeting reality, to mark our presence through the things we hold? Perhaps it's both, a dance between survival and identity, where the act of owning becomes a way to say, I am here, I matter, and this piece of the world is mine. Take a moment to reflect on this. What do you hold on to, not for its usefulness, but for the invisible weight it carries in your life? Is there something, a trinket, a memory, a belief, that you've crowned with a worth no one else can see? Now, let's return to that child, sitting cross-legged on the floor, their broken toy cradled like a fragile secret. Imagine they're small, face tightening as someone suggests trading it for a newer, shinier version. The offer is logical, even kind, but to them, it's unthinkable. The new toy might gleam with promise, but it lacks the invisible history, the whispered stories that only their broken horse can tell. In their refusal, we see a truth about ourselves, that ownership isn't just about having, it's about belonging. We don't just possess things, they possess us in return, binding us with threads of memory and meaning that defy reason. And yet, there's a shadow to this attachment, isn't there? By overvaluing what we own, we risk closing ourselves to what lies beyond. The child who clings to their broken toy might miss the joy of a new adventure with something unfamiliar. The artist who overprices their early work might deter a buyer who sees potential in their growth. We too, in guarding our possessions or ideas with inflated worth, might turn away from opportunities or perspectives that could enrich us. Is there a balance then, between cherishing what is ours and remaining open to what is not? Or are we forever destined to see the world through the lens of ownership, where mine becomes a synonym for priceless? As the day fades and the child finally sets their toy down, perhaps to sleep, they place it carefully beside them, as if to ensure it won't slip away in the night. In that small gesture, there's a tenderness, a quiet claim that speaks to something universal within us all. We are creatures of attachment, weaving stories around the things we hold, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary through the simple act of calling it our own. But as the night deepens and shadows stretch across the room, we might ask ourselves, what do we truly own, and what owns us in return? Is the value we see a reflection of the object, or a projection of our deepest, most hidden needs? Let that question linger like a whisper in the dark as you drift into your own quiet thoughts. As the night stretches its quiet veil over the world, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast, intricate labyrinth. Not a maze of stone or hedge, but one woven from the threads of your own thoughts, emotions, and hidden inclinations. A labyrinth of the mind. You've wandered its twisting corridors, encountered its subtle deceptions, and felt the weight of its unseen forces. Now, as the journey nears its close, you pause at this final precipice, gazing back at the winding paths you've traversed. The air is still, heavy with the scent of revelation, and a question lingers like a whisper in the dark. Can we ever truly master the tricks our minds play on us? Or are we destined to wander forever in their shadows? Look back at those paths now, each turn and corner illuminated by a faint, newfound light. You've seen how a single word or fleeting glance can shift the way you perceive the world, how a first impression can carve a lasting mold, and how the fear of loss can bind you tighter than the promise of gain. You've felt the pull of the crowd, the weight of authority, the silent debt of a kind gesture. Each of these is a thread in the tapestry of your mind, a quiet force that shapes your choices without ever announcing its presence. And yet, standing here at the edge, there's a strange comfort in seeing them for what they are. Not as masters, but as companions on this endless journey of self-discovery. Consider for a moment the nature of awareness itself. To know that a trick exists is not the same as escaping its grasp, but it is a beginning. It's as if you've been handed a lantern in the dark, its glow revealing the hidden snares and false walls that once seemed so solid. With every step, every realization, the labyrinth becomes less a prison and more a map, a guide to understanding, not just the world around you, but the world within. Think of the ancient mariners who learned to read the stars, not to control the sea, but to navigate its tempests. So too can we learn to read the currents of our own minds, steering through bias and illusion with a steadier hand. But there is no final victory here, no moment where the labyrinth vanishes and all becomes clear. The mind is a living thing, ever shifting, ever weaving new paths even as you learn to tread the old ones. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all, that freedom does not lie in escaping the maze, but in walking it with open eyes, in embracing the mystery of your own nature. Take a moment to reflect on this. Let your thoughts drift to a time when you felt caught in a pattern, unaware of the strings that pulled you. Can you see them now, in the quiet of this night? Can you feel the weight of understanding settle over you like a soft, comforting shadow? As you stand at this edge, the labyrinth stretches behind you, its paths glowing faintly in the moonlight of memory. Ahead, the horizon is dark, vast and unknowable, a canvas for dreams yet to unfold. The night deepens, wrapping the world in its gentle hush, and your mind begins to soften at the edges, ready to rest. But before you turn away, let this final thought linger. Each step you take beyond this moment carries the light of what you've learned. The tricks of the mind may never fully fade, but with every quiet reflection, with every pause to question, you carve a path towards something greater, a harmony between the self you know and the self you are yet to discover. Let that thought carry you now as the stillness of the night invites you to release the day's burdens. The labyrinth waits, always, but so too does the promise of tomorrow's understanding. Rest in that promise and let the quiet take you where it will.